I spent weeks analyzing every major battle of ancient Greece using four specific criteria: real historical impact, tactical innovation, political context, and what would have happened if the outcome had been different. And what I found is going to go against everything you learned in school. Because the most famous battle isn't the most important. The most heroic battle isn't the most decisive. And the battle that changed the world in the most permanent way probably isn't even the one you're thinking of right now. This video isn't a summary, it's a ranking with criteria, arguments, and some controversial opinions that are going to make Greek history fans fight in the comments. And that's exactly what I want. If you're into real historical analysis, subscribe to the channel now, turn on the bell, ushering and drop a like, because this video goes deep into every choice I made and you're going to want to debate it. Before getting to the battles that actually mattered, I need to be honest about some that get way more attention than their real historical impact deserves. And yeah, this is where I start getting controversial. Thermopylae lands in Category C, not because it wasn't important, but because it was a military defeat. The Greeks lost the pass, the Persians kept advancing, Athens was sacked and burned. From a strictly tactical and strategic standpoint, Thermopylae failed in its objective to stop the invasion. What Thermopylae did, and this is undeniable, was create a symbol. The stand of Leonidas and his allies to the last man became psychological fuel for the rest of the war. My historian Victor Davis Hanson nails it when he says Thermopylae was a moral victory inside a military defeat. But morale isn't strategy, and we don't put symbols at the top of a ranking based on real impact. In the same category, the battles of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, which lasted 27 years, from 431 to 404 BC, produced paradoxical results. The entire war ended in a Spartan victory, but that victory was just as devastating for the winners as it was for the losers. Sparta came out weakened, Athens destroyed, and the power vacuum created the perfect opening that Philip II of Macedon would exploit decades later to subjugate all of Greece. Battles that leave every side weaker and open the door for a third party to conquer everything fall into Category C. They happened. They mattered. But they didn't change the world the way the battles in the next categories did. The Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BC, where Sparta destroyed the Athenian fleet almost completely, only 9 ships escaped, was militarily decisive in ending the Peloponnesian War. But it was the end of a Greek civil war that drained the two greatest powers of the Greek world and left the field wide open for what came next. Category B includes the battles that changed the internal balance of power in Greece, the ones that redefined who was in charge, how they ruled, and with what kind of army. They didn't change the entire world, but they changed everything inside the Greek world. The Battle of Marathon in 490 BC goes here, and that might surprise a lot of people who expected to see it at the top. Marathon was spectacular. 10,000 Athenians and Plataeans, under the command of Miltiades, defeated a Persian force estimated at 30,000 men on a plain in a frontal assault that military manuals still study today. The tactic of reinforcing the flanks and allowing the center to give way before enveloping the enemy was ingenious. The result was a victory that shocked the Mediterranean world, including the Greeks themselves, who didn't believe the Persians could be defeated in open battle. But Marathon didn't stop Persia. Darius was still there. The Persian army still existed. 10 years later, Xerxes came back with a much larger force. Marathon proved that it was possible to defeat the Persians, and that psychological proof is immeasurably valuable. But it didn't solve the Persian problem. The Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, one also falls into Category B, but at the upper end. Epaminondas and the Theban army shattered Sparta's military invincibility with the oblique order, concentrating a force 50 ranks deep on the left flank, something no general had ever attempted before. It was the first major tactical innovation in the Western world documented in enough detail to be studied, and the result was permanent. Sparta never regained the military dominance it had exercised for 2 centuries. Leuctra would have taken the top spot in my ranking if the Theban hegemony it created had lasted. But it only held for a single generation, until Philip II of Macedon entered the scene. Before I reveal the Category A battles, I want your take. Which one do you think is going to be at the top? Drop a comment right now. Salamis, Gaugamela, or something else? I'll be checking the replies later. We've reached the battles that changed the world. Not just the Greek world, but the entire world. Here there's only one criterion. What would have happened if the outcome had been different? How much of the subsequent history of humanity depends on what happened on these battlefields? The Battle of Salamis in September 480 BC sits in Category A. The most respected modern historians, including Herodotus himself, who lived close to the events, are unanimous in considering Salamis the turning point of the Persian Wars and possibly the most important naval engagement in Western history. The context: Athens had been evacuated and burned by the Persians. The Greek fleet was gathered at Salamis, clearly outnumbered, with generals from various city-states wanting to retreat to the Peloponnese. Themistocles, the Athenian strategos, made a decision that can only be described as strategic genius and geopolitical bluff at the same time. He sent a secret message to Xerxes himself, saying the Greek fleet was planning to flee and that it was now or never to capture it. Xerxes ordered both exits of the strait to be blocked. The trap snapped shut on the Persian fleet. The Greek ships, more agile triremes with better maneuverability in confined space, destroyed hundreds of Persian vessels in the Strait of Salamis. Xerxes watched the disaster sitting on a throne on a nearby hill. The Persian numerical superiority, which was devastating in open sea, turned into a fatal disadvantage in the narrow waters. If the Greeks had lost at Salamis, Persia would have controlled the eastern Mediterranean, when Athenian democracy, which was just taking its first steps, would have been crushed before it could consolidate. Philosophy, theater, the foundations of Western thought that flourished in the subsequent age of Pericles, wouldn't have happened in that form. It's not an exaggeration to say that Salamis was the moment when Western civilization decided to exist. There's a battle that almost no popular history video discusses with the depth it deserves, and in my ranking, it shares first place with Salamis, the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. 1 year after Salamis, with the Persian fleet destroyed, General Mardonius was still in Greece, with what remained of Xerxes' massive land army. Elite forces, trained, battle-hardened, and determined to complete the conquest. He had built a fortified camp near Plataea in Boeotia, in a strategic position designed to force the Greeks to attack under unfavorable conditions. What happened at Plataea was the largest military coalition the Greeks had ever assembled. Spartans, Athenians, Corinthians, Megarians, and dozens of other city-states, totaling an estimated 40 to 50,000 men. On the Persian side, Mardonius had forces similar in number, but vastly superior in cavalry. The battle was long, chaotic, with repositioning movements that lasted days. The historian Herodotus records details that read like a work of fiction, the Spartan army having to withdraw without turning their backs on the enemy, maintaining formation while Persian cavalry harassed them. The Athenians holding the opposite flank against the Persians' Greek allies. And the decisive moment when the Spartan phalanx finally turned and attacked in full formation. Mardonius was killed in the fighting. Without their commander, the Persian army disintegrated. The Greeks pursued and destroyed a significant portion of the enemy forces. Plataea deserves to be at the top because it completed what Salamis had started. Salamis destroyed the fleet. Plataea destroyed the army. Together, the two battles ended the possibility of a Persian conquest of Greece in a definitive and permanent way. But Plataea shows up less in popular documentaries because it lacks the cinematic drama of Salamis. No king sitting on a throne watching his own disaster. Just a long, complex, and absolutely decisive battle. If you've made it this far, you already get my methodology. The criterion is real, lasting impact, not historical romanticism, and by that standard, the battle that takes the absolute #1 spot in my ranking of ancient Greek battles is Gaugamela in 331 BC. It's not Marathon, it's not Thermopylae, it's Gaugamela. The context: Alexander had already defeated the Persians at Granicus and Issus, but Darius III still controlled the heart of the Achaemenid Empire: Persia, Babylon, Media, Bactria. For Gaugamela, he assembled the largest army Alexander had ever faced. An estimated 100 to 200,000 men with war elephants, scythe chariots, steppe cavalry, infantry from dozens of conquered peoples. Alexander had 47,000. The numerical gap was so brutal that on the night before the battle, General Parmenion suggested a surprise night attack to even the odds. Alexander refused with a line recorded by Arrian: "I do not steal victory." The next day, what happened is still considered by military historians one of the most brilliant tactical maneuvers ever executed on a battlefield. Alexander positioned his army at an oblique angle, drawing the Persian cavalry to the flanks while the Macedonian phalanx pinned the center. When a microscopic gap opened in the Persian line, Alexander personally led the charge of the companion cavalry through that opening, straight toward Darius himself. The king of Persia, who had already fled at Issus when Alexander charged at him, fled again, and an army of 200,000 collapsed because its leader ran. Gaugamela wasn't just a military victory, it was the end of the greatest empire the world had seen up to that point. Persia, which had subjugated half the known world, which had burned Athens, which had pursued Greece for 150 years, ended in a single day. Babylon opened its gates voluntarily. Persia fell. India opened up to Greek exploration. The Hellenistic world, in which spread Greek language, philosophy, architecture, and rational thought across the Mediterranean and the Middle East, was born at Gaugamela. In my final ranking, Salamis and Plataea share the top of classical Greek history, but Gaugamela stands above them all, because Salamis saved Greece, Gaugamela saved Greece, and then changed the entire world. Ranking battles is always controversial because it involves criteria, and any criterion reflects a perspective. My perspective is clear. Real, lasting historical importance beats drama and romanticism every time. One Thermopylae is the most famous battle of ancient Greece. Gaugamela is the most important. Salamis is the one that saved what we call Western civilization, and Plataea is the battle that finished the job without ever getting the credit it deserves. Do you agree with this ranking? Disagree with any pick? Drop a comment with which battle you'd put at the top, and tell me why. That's exactly the kind of debate this channel was made for. Hit like if you enjoyed the analysis, share it with someone who truly loves history, and click the next video on your screen right now. It was made especially for those who made it all the way to the end of this one.